Hi, everyone.
Hello. We're in the Finished Mystery, page 32. We're dealing with the text about the Church of Pergamum, which is chapter 2 of Revelation, verse 13. Here's what it says in the ESV. I know where you dwell, where Satan's throne is, yet you hold fast my name, and you did not deny my faith, even in the days of Antipas, my faithful witness, who was killed among you, where Satan dwells. So I guess the first point I'd like to make is that you see a mixed review here right away.
Mm-hmm.
He's commending them for holding fast the faith, despite the fact that there's obviously opposition going on, and a martyr, Antipas. And what's the Watchtower going to do with all this? They spend now 2 whole pages on this thought, and what do they do with it? They transfer all of it to the history of the papacy.
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with the papacy, which doesn't exist when John writes this to the church in Pergamum.
Yeah. They take it away from Pergamum right away and make it into a period of time that they've chosen.
So we're go ahead.
Yeah. So it's arbitrary. You know, the way they do it is arbitrary. This is not just this. They don't even say this is not just about Pergamum. They just skip everything to do with Pergamum and make it a period of time in history.
An epoch, as they put it, right, over and over again in this section.
Yeah.
And then we won't belabor the 2 pages because it's just a sorry history of papal corruptions. But by the time you get to the end of it, you think, false religion for some reason.
Yeah.
So we'll just read the beginning where they set the stage for this false analysis and this false application.
So this is a point, too, that what I'm going to read you is in the Finished Mystery, but it's quoting. And who are they quoting? They're quoting themselves.
Zion's Watchtower.
Yeah. So every time there's a quote in here and it has Z and a bunch of numbers, that's, excuse me, that's Zion's Watchtower being quoted. So they do quote Bible commentaries and stuff too. But if you're not paying attention to who's doing the talking, I think if you're more like me, when I was a witness, I never paid attention to where quotes were coming from. References, footnotes. I didn't do that. But if you do, then if it's them speaking about other people, you know, is that a legitimate way of looking at history?
Beware. That having been said, I think we've got to note that the next 2 pages, most of it isn't referenced. Like, we don't know where they got it from.
Yeah, they don't give you a reference.
But based on what they've already said, we know they're getting it from Christendom's sources, principally Protestant sources like the Cyclopedia of McClintock and Strong.
Right.
So these are history books of Protestants, and what we need to say right away is the Catholics, if you read their own histories of the Catholic Church, they admit the papal corruptions.
Yeah.
But they don't draw the same conclusion you do. Why?
So this is a quote from the Watchtower, which says, during this period, the true Christians were tested and proved by the introduction and development of pagan and papal ideas. The pagan priests, unwilling to lose their positions of honor and influence among the people, while nominally professing Christianity, brought their former ideas with them into the Christian church. So that's about Pergamum. Not really, is it? Okay, and then the second paragraph, this
is Finished Mystery this time.
Yeah. The Finished Mystery starts by saying, throughout all the western part of Europe, the Bishop of Rome finally came to be called the Papa, or Pope, or Father of the Church. Now they have a quote. Again, it's from their own literature, from the Watchtower. Whoever denounces this attempt to disobey the direct command of Jesus, Matthew 23, verse 9, receive the promised persecution, 2 Timothy 3:12. This class in Pergamus is commended by our Lord under the symbol of Antipas, my faithful martyr. In Greek, anti means against, and papas signifies Father.
Well, that's not the opinion of a great many competent explorers of the book of Revelation, so that's their opinion.
Well, they've got...
quoting their own opinion about what these words mean.
Yeah. And notice that they call it the class.
And a symbol.
And a symbol.
Yeah.
So those things are just arbitrary. That's their way of looking at the Bible.
Right.
Seems. But then there's a further comment, which I think is where they were directing this, so that you'd be against the churches, really. So they say, we can give but a partial list of the popes who served from the commendation of Arius to the
condemnation. Yeah.
Condemnation of Arius to the end of the Pergamus epoch. But it will be instructive to those who trust in human ordination and are in sympathy with the efforts of present-day clergy. So that's where they were going. So they want you to have a negative feel for Christendom by cherry-picking a piece of history and forgetting that they know this only because Christendom has revealed it.
Confessed it.
Confessed it, yes.
Yeah. So this transfer of blame, blackballing not just the papacy here, but all the church in the Middle Ages, right into the Protestant era, because they're moving, of course, to a denunciation of the clergy throughout this book. So that's the direction it's all going. But
so if you can find scandal, then that disqualifies that church from being the true church.
Which, again, you need the Church of Pergamum to illustrate your problem. We just said at the beginning when we read the verse, it's partial praise for them keeping the faith, holding to the faith, but you've got a problem.
And they're called my church.
All 7 of these churches, and one of them, Laodicea, doesn't have any praise at all. But it's still Christ's church. He's still working with it and knocking on the door to get their attention. But when you go through the next page and a half after that, after the part that Vivian read, you realize they've moved now not just through the 800 years that they had in the last section in one verse, but they've now moved to something more like 1500 years, all the way from Nicaea to Vatican I. In their application of this to a certain tendency to corruption in the Catholic Church, and more specifically the papacy itself. So you've got a history, confessed again, of licentiousness, of immorality, of murder even, assassinations of popes by other people who come to be in positions of power. Yeah, it's all true. The angle is not often always true. The motivation is not always correctly represented here because they're not quoting. They're just applying it and reading into it themselves. But when you realize that, first of all, the Pergamum situation originally was a church that had mixed blessing and a curse upon it, which is something bad's happening already in 100 AD. But then you look against the backdrop of God's relationship with Israel in the Old Testament, you say, what's your point? You're failing to differentiate between the principle of God's elect, that is his chosen people, and religion. And all the way through the history of the chosen people, from Abraham to Christ, there was corruption among the chosen people. And where did the corruption tend to aggregate? In the power structure. So there's no worse period, even though the judges period is very bad, everybody doing what's right in his own eyes, but it's actually superseded in corruption by the next period, which is give us a king. And you realize if you look at that history of the kings told both in Kings and Chronicles,
mostly bad kings.
At least 3/4 of all the kings are corrupt. Even murderous.
But God
still works in the mess.
That's right. So power is the problem. That's the problem area. So when you look at their own history, the Watchtower's history, would they apply this principle that they have here to the church, to themselves?
Right.
So if there's scandal attached with your first presidents, with Russell and Rutherford, and they've more or less tried to shovel all that away and just say, well, that was then. You can't do that when you don't do it with everyone else. You have no grace for them.
And there's not, they really haven't confessed everything that was wrong with Russell and Rutherford's period.
Yeah, they don't expose it.
They cherry pick their own history.
Yeah, they only talk about it when somebody else has already exposed it.
Yeah. So this is cherry picking church history with the inexcusable selection of only the corrupt portions of church history. Don't you realize that these corruptions of the papacy were criticized by Catholics while they were happening?
That's right.
Not just by Protestants later.
Do they make some reference to a space of time where, you know, how hard it was for them to gain power? Well, that's only because they're getting resistance.
Yeah.
So you don't talk about the resistors. You only talk about the scandal and the power people.
And again, it's worth repeating that this corruption, which reached its nadir in the late medieval period, let's say from around 1100 to the Reformation, it reached its bottom then. But that's not the picture of the whole period. There were even good popes during this period, so you've missed that out too.
Yeah.
And that's on you, because when you selectively cherry pick church history, you're giving every excuse for people to call you. Well, the word is hypocritical for one thing, their own history, but also slanderous.
Yeah.
When you can only see the negative in anybody else, and that's how you characterize them in talking about them, you are guilty of slander.
And you talk about them having power, whereas, you know, the Catholics today, they don't give the Pope the power that witnesses give to the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses.
That's right.
With the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, they have power.
Actual power.
Yeah. It plays out in your life and in how you live and your decisions, and you can't resist them.
Most of the religions of Christendom would envy the power that the clergy of Jehovah's Witnesses currently have.
Yeah. Well, maybe not.
The better ones would not, though, because they know what it comes from and where it goes. Yeah. We're putting a link into what a faithful Catholic, a famous Catholic of the Vatican I period, that is 1870 period, said about his own church, because he's the expert, because he was a historian on medieval history, and way more than you are. And what did he say about that period? Well, the famous saying that power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So who was that? He was a Catholic, Lord Acton. We've done a video about that. And that's going to be the link. And also a playlist, right? Kenneth Scott Latterette, A History of Christianity, a Protestant historian looking at the history of the church and seeing what you see here and a lot more. And a lot of what he sees is good.
You actually have another one that does the history, but you were just going to refer to it, I think. Yeah,
just Walter Rauschenbusch, if you want another playlist that has a lot of church history in it. It's Walter Rauschenbusch, Christianity. What's it called? Well, anyway, Walter Rauschenbusch. It's a playlist. It's about 130 videos, but I think at least 30 or 40 or 50 of them are devoted to his view as a Baptist minister of church history.
So you've got lots of choices. Okay.
See you next time.